Welcome to the latest My Life as a Critic. I am professional film critic Sean Patrick, and on the show, I look back at my own work and critique myself, and then critique the movie again from a, slightly older, more mature perspective. Changing things up a little bit with this episode. The last couple episodes have been like all emotional and like, oh, this movie changed my life, or this movie made me cry. And I thought, let's try and get back to my roots as a sort of a sarcastic Gen X kind of guy, which is kind of the persona I cultivated for so many years and am now I've grown to defy. But I decided to take myself back, pretty far, all the way back to 2002 for today's episode, and a movie that, I'm sure didn't make me cry, didn't really make me feel all that much. A spy movie called Bad Company. Bad Company stars Chris Rock and Anthony Hopkins, and my memory of it is that basically producers looked around and said, what's hot right now? Well, Chris Rock is really hot right now off of that HBO special he did, and he's got that talk show, and people really like him, and he's kind of a rising star. Maybe could be the next Will Smith or Martin Lawrence. Let's put him in a spy movie. Nothing against Chris Rock. I'm not knocking Chris Rock. He was, striking while the iron was hot. The opportunity came up to star in a ridiculous action movie for Jerry Bruckheimer, and he jumped at it. I don't hold it against him. It's off-brand for him now. He's much more of a brainy guy, a director of his own stuff, a really tremendous film writer. You should see Top 5 if you haven't. It's fantastic. He's got a really great eye. He's got a really interesting, almost European sensibility about his direction. If you've seen Why Did it was not Why Did I Get Married? That was the Tyler Perry movie. Something About My Wife. It's killing me now because I really liked the movie. It's a very daring, like I said, very European kind of comedy. I Think I Love My Wife. Yeah, that's what it is. I Think I Love My Wife, which is, like I said, a very daring film. Had a lot of really interesting ideas to it. You could see where it's kind of uneven. You can see where he's kind of a little bit unsure of himself as a director, but it was also his first time out, so it makes sense. But I really love his very unique influences, and I'm glad that is the direction he went. And then, of course, that leading, of course, to Top 5, which is a very auteurist writer-director-driven movie that is also really, really good. And that's the true evolution of Chris Rock as a filmmaker. And I'm really glad that Bad Company didn't work out for him because it allowed him to become the filmmaker that we're kind of enjoying now. Bad Company was a 2002 action movie. Jerry Bruckheimer made it, and that's pretty much where my memory of this thing begins and ends. I don't remember whether or not I liked it or not. I don't remember much about the review I wrote, which I wrote for Bickit.com, Bikkit.com. I always spell it because I'm afraid I'm going to say like a soft T or like a soft K in there, and people are going to go, why did you wrote for Biggit.com? Bickit, Bikkit.com. Of course, I've talked about Bickit before, and the founders, Roy and Sean, who gave me my break as a internet critic. Just one of those silly kids just writing about movies online. And I always hold them in high esteem for giving me my first writing gig back in the day. They didn't have to give me that chance. They didn't have to give me that space to write, and so I appreciate it. Even as they weren't mostly they didn't edit my stuff. They relied on me to be good enough to edit my own stuff, and honestly, I wasn't quite good. quite that great at being an editor. I'm an impatient guy, and I want to get my stuff done and online and ready to be read, and so that kind of defies me. Oh man, this was a Joel Schumacher movie. Oh, so I just pulled up my review, and one of the first things I saw was that it's Joel Schumacher who directed this in 2002. So Schumacher, of course, is a director just extraordinarily uneven. I mean, he's done kind of amazing work with things like Tigerland, these tiny little movies, but then, of course, he made that god-awful George Clooney Batman movie. He really just destroyed the Batman franchise with his just terrible ideas and awful directions. And at the same time, he also directed Phone Booth and Tigerland, which are two really pretty great movies, if you ask me. So let's get to it. I'll read you my review from 2002 of Bad Company. Again, I've not read this in a very long time. I wrote it back in 2002. And I thought it was even lost to the internet but thank you I always mention the Internet Wayback Machine, archive.org. I owe them a lot because most of my work is available because of archive.org. So here's the review I wrote from 2002. Anyone who has ever written a screenplay knows one of the hardest parts is coming up with a title. Back in 2000, Jerry Bruckheimer thought when he bankrolled a mismatched fish-out-of-water buddy action comedy that the film had the perfect title. That title was Black Sheep. Bruckheimer had forgotten that just 3 years earlier, Chris Farley and David Spade starred in a god-awful comedy of the same title, so the title was changed. However, the new title now seems just as curious. Bad Company is the title of at least a dozen films, one of which was a spy movie made in 1990, starring Lawrence Fishburne and Ellen Barkin. Curiously, that film is just like the new Bad Company, about CIA agents. Of course, the fact that I have spent the first few paragraphs of this review writing about the title of the film should indicate how I felt about the latest Bad Company. Chris Rock stars in dual roles, the first being an undercover CIA agent who is killed in the former Czech Republic in an arms deal gone bad. The second role is that of the CIA agent's estranged twin brother, Jake Hayes. After his twin brother's death, Jake is recruited by the CIA to replace him and complete the arms deal. Jake is not surprisingly reluctant to team with the CIA and his brother's former partner, Oakes, Sir Anthony Hopkins. After finances are discussed, Jake eagerly takes up his brother's cause. This, of course, leads to one of those typical fish-out-of-water sequences where the low-class character has to learn to be high-class and do so in very little time. Jake needs to know which fork to use at a fancy dinner, needs to learn how to dress, walk, and speak. It's a scene cribbed from a dozen other formula fish-out-of-water comedies and not improved upon here. Improved upon, sorry. I wrote improved, I swear. My vocal tick. Once Jake is ready, he is taken to the Czech Republic to do the deal. But wouldn't you know it, the same guys who killed his brother are already waiting for Jake and the CIA, and the deal goes bad. The nuclear weapon that was the subject of the deal is stolen and moved to New York City, and somehow Jake's girlfriend is kidnapped. I'm sure there was a good reason for how the bad guys figured out Jake wasn't his brother. I was so bored with Bad Company by this point I didn't care. It's not surprising to find this Formula Swill was directed by Joel Schumacher, the king of Formula Swill. I should note my still simmering bitterness towards the man who destroyed the Batman series. What is surprising is seeing two actors as talented as Sir Anthony Hopkins and Chris Rock in such a conventional film. From the script to the screen, I can't imagine they couldn't see how formulaic and trite this material was. Rock deserves a lot of credit for going off the script as often as he does, providing the only solace from the lame formula, with bits taken from his stand-up act and his just natural wit. Sir Anthony Hopkins, on the other hand, makes it clear that he is merely picking up a check, sleepwalking through the entire film, especially its lamest of all ending. It would be very easy for me to blame Joel Schumacher for this formula trash, but the real fault lies with Jerry Bruckheimer. He, after all, is the one who keeps financing the supposedly crowd-pleasing, screen-tested trash. Bruckheimer knows Formula Swill because he and his late partner Don Simpson invented it. For Chris Rock's hard work, Bad Company gets a 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10 is what I gave it, and it's not a terrible review. It's got a strong, I got a strong attitude about it. I'm very clear with my negative opinion of the film, so I'm not too unhappy with that review. It seems pretty fair and, relatively on the nose, so I got to give myself credit. No spelling errors. So I'm probably going to hate this movie now just as much as I did then, but let's find out. I'm going to watch Bad Company, and I'll be back in just a moment for you and a couple hours for me. Well, I can see why I gave this movie a 4. Chris Rock did make me laugh a couple times, but this movie is pretty bad. And worst of all, it's just really cynical. This is the kind of movie that they just kind of rush into production to take advantage of, whatever opportunity they had with Chris Rock. I said before that maybe he was kind of a secondary choice for a role like this with guys like Chris Tucker or Martin Lawrence, but really this was done to take advantage of the hot streak that he was on with his comedy specials, and he was getting big, and they wanted to take quick advantage of that, and so they made a movie with him, and they didn't really complete a script. They just kind of came up with a very basic, very easy idea that they could cobble together in a couple days, and then they just let kind of Chris Rock riff. And sometimes the riffs are really funny, but when they're not funny, they're just painful. There's this one when they're trying to buy this bomb from this terrorist, and they need time for him to set up a computer and figure out if the bomb is real and steal the code from inside the bomb so they can control the bomb. Whole stupid, pointless spy movie garbage. Anyway, the Chris Rock starts going off. He's trying to give them more time to do whatever they're doing with the bomb, and he starts talking about this doctor at Caltech, Dr. Dre. And then he names off each of the members of NWA, and then talks about Wu-Tang Clan and Dr. Shaq and the Shaq Attack, and as some kind of military maneuver. It's really dumb. It plays off the idea that nobody in the world knows who these people are that he's naming, but everybody knows, basically who these people were. Even in Europe, people were aware of Shaquille O'Neal and the Wu-Tang Clan, Dr. Dre. But it's just such a silly, stupid scene. It goes on forever in this movie, and they just continue. The bit just goes on and on and on until I thought he was going to name every rapper in the industry at some point, or every basketball player on the Lakers at some point. It really just a dumb, dopey bit. And it's among the many dumb and dopey bits. The other thing that stands out about Bad Company is just how bored Anthony Hopkins is. He really couldn't care less. There are moments where he's just sleepwalking through this movie. Things are supposed to be happening, and there's killers in the hallway chasing after Chris Rock, and I mean, it's like Hopkins could barely be bothered to be the action hero CIA agent in this moment. He just kind of walks behind the killers, kind of lazily lifting his arm to fire his gun. Just could not be more bored with this material. And I get it. I'm right there with him. But I paid to, if I'd paid to watch this movie, I did pay to watch this. If I'd paid to watch this movie, I would at least appreciate, an actor who gives a damn about what he's doing. And Anthony Hopkins doesn't give a damn in this movie. He couldn't care less. And while that's entertaining to me as a fan of bad movies and bad acting, I can understand where if you're actually somebody who paid for a ticket to see this, how annoying it would really, really be to sit through this thing and see that Anthony Hopkins just doesn't care. And Chris Rock, they didn't bother to write a script, so they just let Chris Rock just riff on whatever came to his mind, and that became an entire scene, an entire series of scenes, punchlines to scenes that don't need his kind of... I mean, he's lifting stuff right out of his own act at times. There's a scene late where he's talking with John Slattery, who plays the head of the CIA in this movie, well ahead, of course, of his starring role on Mad Men. And he literally lifts an entire bit from one of his comedy specials and uses it as a insult on Slattery. And it's like, really? This movie is so bereft of its own ideas that they just let Chris recycle his stand-up material? Oh, man, it's just so freaking lazy and really irritating. This cast, boy, if you had this cast today, you'd be blown away by it, because at the time, nobody knew Gabriel Macht, who would go on to star in Suits, or Kerry Washington, now the star of Scandal. There's Daniel Sunjata, who's on one of those Chicago shows, I think, Fire or Police or CSI, whatever it is, that he was on one of those shows, I think, fairly recently, and he's been in a number of primetime dramas. Lots of big-time TV people. John Slattery, like I mentioned, is also in this cast. This would be a massive cast today. At the time, they were relatively unknown actors. But Gabriel Macht actually really stood out to me in this movie. He's kind of a badass, kind of a cool CIA agent, and I really dug what they did with his character. He seemed to be he kind of get both the fun tone of it and also the action tone of it, and seemed to care far more about it than either of the two leads did. Like I said, Rock is just riffing off of his old material, and Anthony Hopkins just wishes the movie was over. So he doesn't get any big scenes, but I liked at least the fact that he seemed to understand the movie he was making and kind of wanting to be there, other than everybody else in the movie. But this is really a standard buddy comedy action movie. Just nothing stands out about Bad Company whatsoever. And what do I take away from this movie, from myself, from 14 years later? I don't know. I'm no more tolerant of this kind of movie than I ever was before. I'm still annoyed as much as I think I was back then. I still laughed a lot, in the same places I probably laughed back then. So really, I've not changed at all by the standard of this movie. I don't have any more real insight other than the bankruptcy of it, the sheer and utter bankruptcy of the way they were attempting to cash in on Chris Rock being a hot property at the time. Other than that, and of course, you got two guys willing to just sell their souls for as much cash as they can get, and Joel Schumacher and Jerry Bruckheimer. They don't care about quality. They care about they care about making money, and that's fine. Everybody needs to make money, but the way they make money is so just ugly and bankrupt, and just it's done in a spirit that's it's icky. It turns my stomach, because they pretend, especially Schumacher pretends to be an artist and actually has some talent when he wants to, but just other times he's just Mr. Paycheck. He's just, let me get some piece of in the can, and that's it, and that's all I'm here for. And he doesn't really care about the quality of his films, unless that's like I said, the personal stuff that he makes, like Phone Booth or Tigerland, movies he actually cares about and wants to actually do something with and actually show people he has talent. Otherwise, it's a job to him. It's a paycheck. It's how much money can we steal from people before they realize how empty this work is. And maybe that's what Anthony Hopkins is reacting to in the movie, with his just bored, I wish I wasn't here performance. And Chris Rock, I guess, making the best of a bad situation. If I've not read anything about him about this movie, but I gather that he just looked at what was given to him and thought, this is really crappy. I'm just going to do, some riffs, and maybe I can make something work. I'll just do a little improv here and there, maybe kick in a little bit of my stand-up material and try and make the best of this bad situation. And good for him. At least he was trying, as compared to Hopkins. At least he had made an effort to try to make the movie entertaining, even if his effort was in the direction of recycling his own material. There's nothing to be taken away from this. This is the first movie I think I've watched in this series where I just didn't take anything new or interesting away. I mean, Dwayne Hopwood was a revelation in that movie. Still was better than I remembered it, and same for Things We Lost in the Fire. And obviously, the Greenberg episode, I talked about that movie kind of changing my life, literally. This movie, I learned nothing from it. I took away nothing. My review was, pretty good. It was, solid. It was pretty much exactly what the movie is. And to look at that and to look at what I'm telling you today in this review, I learned nothing about myself as a writer or critic. And the movie is it's just a empty little, shell of a thing that shouldn't really exist but does, and has been forgotten by most people, as well as should be, because it's not worth remembering. I'm starting to hate this movie more just because I don't come away with it from anything. I come away with nothing, no honest to God insights, nothing new to say about it, and that sucks, man. That sucks that a movie could be this bereft of anything redeeming, like anything just memorable. That just really stinks that this movie ever even existed, because they just don't care. They didn't care when they made it, and there's no reason to care about it now. And that's really, I guess, the sad thesis statement of Bad Company. I'm Sean Patrick, and this has been My Life as a Critic, episode 14. Thank you for listening.